license, registration, or just some good excuses, old man. The young officer's mocking tone cut through the summer air as he circled the weathered Ford pickup, chuckling with his partner. The driver didn't argue, didn't even look up. He simply kept both hands on the wheel, steady, silent, and scarred. An hour later, when a black SUV pulled up bearing government plates, everything changed. The four-star general who emerged didn't salute. Instead, he pointed at the officers and delivered 6 words that would haunt them forever. "You just stopped the man who trained me." The morning that changed everything, William Bill Henderson, 84, was heading home from Peterson's hardware store. His old F-150 truck rattled with every turn, but it ran because he'd rebuilt it himself in '71. He wore a faded work shirt, denim jeans, and a cap with barely visible embroidery. U.S. Army, Delta Force. No one ever noticed him, and that's exactly how he preferred it. That morning, he'd purchased materials to repair a wheelchair ramp for elderly Mrs. Rodriguez down the street. No charge, of course. A mile from home, red and blue lights flashed in his rearview mirror. Bill pulled over calmly, keeping his hands on the wheel as decades of training had taught him. 2 young officers approached, one immediately tapping the hood. No current plates, expired tags, driving a pile of rust. The other smirked. "Probably unregistered. Maybe stolen. What do you think, old-timer?" Bill replied softly, "She's been mine since 1971. Got ID." When he handed it over, they scoffed at the military identification. "Retired Special Forces, huh? Sure you are. Sit tight, Grandpa." They pulled him from the vehicle. One laughed. "You sure you're not hauling contraband in this thing?" Bill said nothing. The invisible warrior, as the officers circled his truck, running their fingers over the dents and rust. They couldn't read the stories written in metal. Cambodia 1974, Nicaragua 1981. Operations that didn't officially exist on any deployment roster. "Step over here, sir," one said, the word dripping with mockery. Bill complied with measured, deliberate movements. Years of covert operations had taught him that resistance often escalated situations unnecessarily. Besides, he had nowhere pressing to be. "What's in the back?" The taller officer gestured toward the lumber and hardware supplies. "Wheelchair ramp materials for Mrs. Rodriguez." "Sure it is." The officer laughed, sharing a knowing look with his partner. Bill's weathered hands bore the calluses of a man who'd built and rebuilt more than just trucks. They constructed field hospitals under enemy fire, emergency shelters during floods, and yes, dozens of ramps for veterans who couldn't navigate their own porches anymore. The sun beat down mercilessly as they made him empty his pockets. Keys, wallet, a worn photo, and a small notebook filled with names, some with stars beside them, some crossed out entirely. "What's this? Some kind of code?" The officer flipped through the notebook carelessly. "Names of men I served with," Bill said quietly. The officer tossed it back without care. "Well, your truck's definitely not road legal." Bill caught the notebook gently, tucking it back into his pocket with the reverence of a chaplain handling sacred texts. He didn't correct them, didn't explain that his vehicle had a special historical designation that exempted it from certain regulations. He just stood there, straight-backed, patient, silent. The weight of silence, they made him sit on the curb. People drove by, phones recording. One officer said, "He's being uncooperative." The other added, "Might be a security risk." They called it in, possible stolen vehicle, elderly male, uncooperative tone. Bill simply stared at the horizon. In his pocket was a folded letter, a retirement commendation signed by 3 Joint Chiefs of Staff. In the glove box, a Medal of Honor certificate and photos of units he'd once commanded. "This is protocol," they told him. "You understand." He didn't reply. After 30 minutes, one of them kicked a tire and muttered, "Bet this guy thinks he's some kind of Rambo." A passing teenager snickered, taking a selfie with Bill in the background. "Grandpa's in trouble," he captioned it, uploading to social media without a second thought. "Should we check his medications?" The younger officer joked. "Maybe he's forgotten who he is." Bill's silence was mistaken for confusion rather than what it truly was: the practiced patience of a man who had endured interrogations by experts far more intimidating than two local officers. Recognition: an older gas station clerk nearby recognized Bill. Quietly, he made a phone call. "You're not going to believe who they've got sitting on the ground right now." 40 minutes passed. The officers laughed, sipped coffee. One sat on the hood. At minute 59, the wind shifted. A black SUV turned the corner, government plates, tinted windows. It rolled to a stop, and both officers stood as the back door opened. A tall man in full four-star general uniform stepped out. "Which of you stopped this man?" The midday heat rippled off the asphalt as Bill sat motionless, his shadow barely offering relief. The officers had positioned themselves under a nearby tree, their cruiser's air conditioning running periodically when they climbed in to check records. A small crowd had gathered across the street. Whispers circulated. Most assumed Bill was just another troublemaker, perhaps suffering from dementia. Few noticed how perfectly still he sat, how measured his breathing remained. The posture of a man who had once waited 72 hours in jungle mud for an extraction team. "The truth unveiled, sir. We were just..." One officer stammered. The general raised a hand. "That man, William Henderson, taught me how to lead." Fort Bragg, 1985. "He ran reconnaissance operations that saved my entire squad during training when we lost signal in the Everglades." The general's aide stepped forward, carrying a leather portfolio embossed with the presidential seal. He stood at perfect attention beside his superior officer. The crowd had grown, drawn by the unexpected appearance of military brass in their small town. Cell phones recorded everything. "We didn't know." One officer blinked. "You didn't ask," the general replied coldly. The general walked to Bill. "Permission to help you up, Sergeant Major." Bill stood without assistance. "Permission granted, sir." Cameras now recorded in stunned silence. The general turned to the officers. "You just disrespected a man with 4 combat tours and 45 years of service. This truck, it's part of Army history. So is he." The lesson: the general faced the growing crowd. "This is what happens when we stop teaching respect." A young girl whispered to her mother, "Is he famous?" "No, honey," she replied. "He's more than that. He's real." One of the officers removed his sunglasses. "Sir, we're sorry." Bill simply said, "Don't apologize to me. Apologize to the next old man, before you assume he's nothing." General Phillips continued, his voice carrying across the gathering. Sergeant Major Henderson led the operation that extracted 32 hostages from the Cambodian jungle in '88. He returned to active duty at age 62 after 9/11s to train special operations units in advanced survival techniques. 4 presidents have shaken his hand. His mission records will remain classified until 2080. A woman in nurse's scrubs approached. Mr. Henderson donated blood every month for 35 years. Never missed an appointment. The officers looked increasingly uncomfortable. "The truck you're mocking," General Phillips gestured, transported medical supplies during Hurricane Katrina. Bill drove it through 5 feet of water to reach stranded families. The older officer cleared his throat. "Sir, we were just following protocol for vehicles without proper..." "Protocol?" The general's voice sharpened. "Protocol is built on judgment, officer. William Henderson wrote the protocol for night extractions that's still used by our forces today." Legacy: that afternoon, the Sheriff's Department issued a public statement. The incident made national news. Legendary veteran detained. General defends former mentor. The mayor declared July 15th as William Henderson Day. Donations flooded in, $312,000 within the first week. Bill directed every penny toward building wheelchair ramps for disabled veterans nationwide. The Henderson Initiative was established, with a waiting list of over 400 homes needing accessibility modifications. A bronze plaque now stands at the street corner where he was stopped. Not every uniform comes with a spotlight, but every act of service leaves a legacy. Bill kept driving that same truck, still fixed ramps. But now when people saw him, they didn't look through him. They stepped aside with respect. One of the officers visited him weeks later. "I'm truly sorry, sir." Bill poured him coffee. "You learn from it, or someone else pays the price next time." And from that day on, every rookie in that department read Bill Henderson's file before touching their badge. The transformation rippled outward. Within days, the video had been viewed 12 million times. Veterans groups rallied, sharing similar stories. #NeverNowWarriorStop began trending. Bill, as usual, avoided the spotlight. He continued his quiet work, building his 27th wheelchair ramp at summer for an Iraq War veteran. The younger officer, Thomas Martinez, didn't just apologize and disappear. He began volunteering at the VF Hall on weekends. At first, the veterans eyed him suspiciously, the cop who disrespected one of their own. But Bill's acceptance gradually opened doors. "Why did you really come back?" Bill asked him one evening as they repaired a leaking roof. "Because I realized I knew nothing about the people I swore to protect," Thomas admitted. 5 years on the force, and I never once visited this place." The ripple effect: the sheriff implemented a new training program. Recognition and respect. Veterans in our community. Bill reluctantly agreed to speak at the first session, where he said just 12 words. Service doesn't end with the uniform. Neither should the respect for it. General Phillips returned 3 months later, this time without ceremony or uniform. He and Bill sat on the porch of Bill's modest home, sharing bourbon and watching fireflies. "You turned it around, Bill, like always." Bill shook his head. They turned it around themselves. All they needed was a mirror. The truck still rattles down Main Street every morning. Still carries lumber, tools, and occasionally a flag-draped coffin when a veteran passes with no family to bear them to rest. But now, police cruisers pull over when they see it coming. Not to stop it, but to salute it. And at the police academy, every new recruit reads a laminated card with 6 words. "You never know who you're stopping."